Today we're going to be reviewing for lessons 3-4 through 3-6, and this is for the algebra quiz. So the first question here, it says, suppose y varies directly as x. That sentence tells us that we are going to be using direct variation. So, specifically, y varies directly as x. If you see the words varies directly, that tells you that the form that we use for direct variation equations is y equals kx. So then if we're using that form, the first part of this next sentence says if y equals 4 when x equals 8, we're going to use that information to find k, and that's going to be our first step. So we plug in 4 for y, 8 for x. Usually we see the number coming before the variable, so let me switch that to be 4 equals 8k, and we're trying to solve for k. So we would need to divide to cancel out the 8, and we get 4 over 8 equals k. Now we want to write that as a simplified fraction, so it would be 1/2 equals k. And we're going to use that to write out our equation. So k would be 1/2, and I'm going to write it out as y equals 1/2 x. Now I need to write this out as an equation because the next part of the problem says find y when x equals 56. So I need to plug in x as 56 into my equation and solve for y. So I'm going to multiply 1/2 times 56. I can make them both fractions, and I can actually cross simplify here, and I get 28 over 1, or just 28. So the answer for this problem is actually going to be just y equals 28, but we had to come up with the equation first to get it. The next problem, again, you want to read the problem out first. It says Susan's wages vary directly as the time she works. If her wages for 10 hours are $100, what are her wages for 40 hours? So we need to, again, think of a direct variation equation because of the fact that it says vary directly. So we're using y equals kx. Now we need to determine, because it doesn't tell us which is the x value and which is the y value here. It just says for her wages for 10 hours she gets $100. So we need to figure out which one is the y and which one is the x variable. We need to do that by determining which one is dependent and which one is independent. So we need to think about, are the hours depending on the money, or is the money depending on the hours? And in this case, at a job, you're going to make money based on how many hours you work, so the money is going to be dependent on the hours. And the dependent variable is always your y. So we're going to plug in 100 then for y, and 10 for x in our equation, and we're going to solve for k. So again, I'm going to rewrite this as 10k instead of k10 equals 100, and then I'm going to divide both sides by 10 to get k equals 10. Now we need to use our direct variation equation to plug back in the k value, and then it asks us one more part of the question, which if we go back it says what are her wages for 40 hours? Well, the hours represent x. We determined that in the beginning. So that means 40 is going to go in for x. and I get y equals 10 times 40, or y equals 400, and that would be my answer. Next, we're determining whether 1, 4, 8, 13, and so on is an arithmetic sequence. So we need to look at the pattern, and for a sequence pattern, it has to be the constant number for the pattern. So we're going to be either adding by the same number every time or subtracting by the same number every time. So in this case, to get from 1 to 4, we need to add 3, but then 4 to 8, we're adding 4. So we can already tell that this is not going to be a constant pattern. So that's going to give us a no for this answer. It's not an arithmetic sequence. Next is find the next 3 terms of the arithmetic sequence. So this is telling us that it's going to be a constant pattern. We just need to figure out what the pattern is. So from 4 to 8, we are adding 4, and we are consistently then adding 4. So the next 3 terms, we're going to add 16 plus 4, which is 20. 20 plus 4 is going to be 24. And 24 plus 4 is going to be 28. And we could keep going forever and ever, but they only need the first 3 terms. The next one is, again, an arithmetic sequence, but we need to find the 10th term, so we need to use the arithmetic sequence equation, which I will provide for you tomorrow, but you need to know what each part represents. So here's the equation. We're given a sub 1, which is negative 2, and we're given d, which is 3. Now, if we're finding the 10th term, 10 is going to represent n in this particular problem. The n by itself, not the one with the a. So we have negative 2 plus, in parentheses, 10 minus 1 times 3. And then we just need to solve. So we need to use order of operations. We could either distribute the 3 first, or we could do parentheses first. So we have negative 2 plus 10 minus 1 is 9 times 3. And then order of operations, we need to multiply before we add. So negative 2 plus 27, which would give me positive 25. And that would be our answer. The next one is the following relationship proportional. We need to look at these as ratios. And you can either, if this confuses you, you can either cross it out and just go with the rest of the ratios, or you can use it if you need it at that particular time. What I mean by this is, if you have any value of x being 0, the shortcut here is to look at the y value, and if it's also 0, it's proportional. But if it's not 0, it's not proportional. But the problem is that if there is no x is 0 in your table, you also need to determine whether it's proportional or not by using the fact that they're ratios. So if we make each value x over y just a ratio, these are all the same, but in this case 0 over 14 is not the same. So this is going to be not proportional. So there's 2 ways to figure it out. Either by making them all ratios, and if they are not all the same ratio, not including the 0, when it's 0, 0, then it's going to be a no. If they are not all the same, if they are all the same, again, not including if it's 0, 0, then it's going to be a yes. So, again, keep in mind what I just said about proportional or not proportional. The shortcut here, if this is supposed to be proportional, is that if the x is 0, the y also has to be 0. So, it's going to be 0 here. And then we need to fill in, whoops, this value. So if you didn't see it already, you need to just look at the pattern for the rest of this. So it's going to have a common pattern of adding 12, so this value would be filled in at 60. Now we need to find the function that represents the relationship. So we have two options. We have y equals kx and y equals mx plus b. A function would just change this to f of x equals kx at the end, or f of x equals mx plus b. But we don't need to worry about this during the process. We can just choose from these two equations while we're solving. So if we look at the table, we first need to figure out whether this is proportional or not. So I was saying if both values are 0, then you could say yes right away. If you didn't have any zeros in here, you'd still say yes because each ratio is the same. Okay, 1 over 3, 2 over 6, 3 over 9, and so on. So we said yes. That means we're using this form to write our function. So we need to find k first. K represents the slope, so we're going to find the slope first, which is the y values subtracted over the x values subtracted. As long as you pick two consecutive points, it doesn't matter which 2 points you use here. So we find 3 over 1, or 3. That's our k value. So we need to plug it into our equation. Now, this would normally be our answer, but since it says function, we just need to replace the y with f of x. So this is our answer. The next one, we're determining whether it's proportional or not. So again, look at where the 0 is for x. Since that's a different number for y, then we know that it's not proportional. So we're going to use y equals mx plus b. Again, we first need to find the slope, so we can just choose the first 2 points, which are 0, 1, and 1, 3. And we need to subtract the y values over the x values. So we get 2 over 1, or 2. So our equation is y equals 2x, but then we need to find b for this particular problem. So to find b, we need to pick another random point, doesn't matter which one, and we're going to plug in x for x and y for y to find b. So let's say we chose 0, 1. 1 is going to go in for our y, 0 is going to go in for x, and we have plus b. So we get 0 plus b. And then to get b by itself, we need to move the 0 away. So 1 minus 0 would be 1, and that is b. So we have our slope and our b. We plug that in, and this would be our equation, but then we need to write it as a function. So f of x equals 2x plus 1. So this is our actual answer. And then one more. Again, we're looking at when 0 is x, y is something different, so that's a no. So we use y equals mx plus b. We find our slope first. Let's use the first 2 points. So 3 minus 4 for our y's, and 1 minus 0 gives us negative 1 over 1, or just negative 1. So that's our slope. Then we need to plug that into our equation and find our b value. And again, we're plugging in 1 point, doesn't matter which one here, y for y, x for x, and we're solving for b. So we get 4 equals 0 plus b. Subtract the 0 to get b by itself, so 4 would be b. So if we put it all together, y equals negative 1x, or just x, negative x, plus 4. And then since it's a function, we need to write it as f of x. So we just do f of x equals negative 1x, or negative x, plus 4. And that's our answer. And that would conclude this lesson, or this quiz review.